The epic saga of Final Fantasy takes a lot of different forms. Every single Final Fantasy game is really focused on the essence of evolution. Each new entry completely reinvents the combat, the art style, the characters, even the vibe of the game itself. And as a person that grew up playing a lot of Final Fantasy and has watched it go from turn-based combat to active battles all the way up to this more action-y focus, it's been so fascinating to watch how things have purposefully changed. But there's also a lot of pressure if you're constantly trying to adapt, if you're constantly trying to make the best Final Fantasy of all time. So I've played about 20 hours now of Final Fantasy XVI, and I kind of want to give some impressions on the game as it currently exists. Thoughts on the weird performance issues, the incredibly deep lore, and why I do feel like this is a game that deserves the Final Fantasy name. Are you ready? Here we go. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here. Hi, hope you're having a great day. If you could like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, this video is obviously going to be completely spoiler-free because I haven't finished the game yet. I'm actually getting on a plane here in just a couple hours, but I wanted to talk about this game because while I have early access to it, I'm mostly just amazed as to how incredibly freaking big it is. After 20 hours, I do feel like I've barely scratched the surface. I haven't had a chance to do all the side quests, I haven't even upgraded my gear or even unlocked the final magics, and it just seems like even compared to other Final Fantasies, this is something spectacular. My idea for this video is to try and just loosely discuss the themes of the story itself without ruining any of the big twists, and talk very heavily about the gameplay of it, because by far the most controversial aspect of it, the part that people seem to be so dead set on, is this incredibly quick sense of pacing. When you fight, it is lightning fast. Ducking, dodging, parrying, constantly trying to stagger an enemy and hit their elemental weaknesses. This is a different era of Final Fantasy, and some people seem to be a bit terrified by that, if I'm being completely honest. Let's start things off by talking about the story itself, though. So we're playing as this gentleman named Clive, who's stuck in the middle of a very messy war. This game is very much heavily inspired by Game of Thrones. And what I mean by that is that this has a lot of different rival houses. There is a lot of backstabbing and betrayal. A lot of people that are constantly trying to one-up or screw each other over, even if it ends up hurting them in the process. But along with that, there is a central focus to this game, which is the concept of bearers. These are people that essentially could use magical abilities without the power of the Mother Crystal. Everybody in this universe can use magic if they sniff a little bit of this Mother Crystal. It lets you essentially get imbued with temporary magics. But some people, the branded ones, can use it, instantly. They are just people that are born innately with the power to command certain elemental types. Fire, lightning, a defensive earth set of skills, or healing. Now, what's interesting is that as you explore the different territories, these branded people are treated very differently. In some of them, they're considered like lords and ladies, the highest caste of system, whereas in other places, they're considered as like practically mutants. They treat you like crap. They make you do like manual labor and stuff using your abilities. It's interesting to see that the different places we visit in Final Fantasy XVI, it really has a sense of size that I haven't felt in a Final Fantasy in a very long time. Additionally, though, let's talk about how you're going to be exploring. So a lot of these clips look open world. It looks like I'm like running all over the place and stuff. That's not quite the case. They call this open zone, and that's definitely what this is. There's places you visit. There's times where you're going to be walking through like beautiful deserts and crazy forests and stuff like that. But at all times, it's really meant for you to focus on that next objective or nearby side quests. You can't just run from point A to point B. A lot of times it's a set contained area. But to me, I actually think this is a big benefit. Thus far, I have very much enjoyed that this game is very much contained. It is focused on telling the best story with the best fights and the best bounties. It wants to give you stuff that's going to get you engaged without a bunch of random crappy filler, just people trying to clog up your path. It's really cool to get a chance to explore these zones and find little tiny hidden paths and really kind of soak up the really beautiful ambience. I think focusing this so much on the idea of exploration without an impossible amount of scope. This doesn't feel like an Ubisoft game. This is a Square Enix project. You're going to have a custom-tailored adventure that just feels so freaking good. Now, I do want to say, I like Clive a lot, but I do feel like at times, as good as his voice acting is, the heavy reliance on these Game of Thrones themes at times fell a bit short for me. Now, obviously, I haven't beaten the game yet. Maybe it all comes together at the end, but I like Clive as an actor. I like how he reacts to situations, but some of the dialogue and side quests, or whenever a major person just gets Game of Throned, I kind of felt like his interpretations of the event weren't quite as big and crazy as I would have hoped. It's a good story. I actually like the plot a lot thus far. I'm very happy to be, beating it. But as it stands, it does feel like something is kind of lacking. This is the first Final Fantasy that was originally dubbed in English, and it's mocapped in English, it's voice acted in English, like the characters' faces sync up to the English voice acting, whereas typically with Final Fantasy games, the acting is synced up to the Japanese voices. This is a very English-focused game, and as good as the facial animations and stuff are, it still feels like they could have gone a bit harder on those emotional beats, at least to me thus far. Let me just take myself out of the corner of the video for a minute here to talk technical details so you can see these full, beautiful, glorious graphics. This game was built from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, and it absolutely reflects that. From the fact that it has ambient lighting, to the proper shadow effects, to the beautiful details on little tiny bits of, just everything around you. Metal swords look like metal. Leather armor has that realistic randomness of the natural piece of tanned hide. Even small stuff like if you're in a fort, you can tell that each and every brick looks like it was placed by hand with no repeated patterns. This world appears alive, and it makes the story actually hit harder since they're battling against this stuff called the Blight. You realize how much this world dying matters. But with that being said, the biggest downside of Final Fantasy XVI is the rather erratic frame rate. I think the game is supposed to be hitting a solid 60, but for me, it felt like most fights, most wandering around was at least a decent frame rate, but there were a lot of sections that felt like they were closer from 40 to 45 frames a second. Now, I guess most people are pretty satisfied with a 30 FPS, but to me, it looked a bit strange when you see those frame rate dips, randomly just having the frame rate go down. It's a bit of a disappointment, but let's go back to talking gameplay. Now, I want to talk briefly about this quest hub. So this is a place you're going to be able to visit whenever you want. It's like your big home base. It's where you pick up a lot of stuff like there's a Moogle that gives you bounties. They're like optional side fights that give you cool extra resources. It's a place where you can do side quests. You can meet people. You can read letters to get additional lore and expanded bits about the world itself. There's a blacksmith to upgrade your gear. I think the quest hub system is actually really smart for the pacing itself. I like the fact that in Final Fantasy XV, you really felt like you were just supposed to wander from town to town and stumble upon random tiny objectives that didn't really matter, like photographing a crater or helping out one of your buddies do something very minor. Here, having a quest hub that slowly gets improved and you unlock more stuff, it feels great. It actually seems like a proper evolution of the concept of, hey, let's make this Final Fantasy, but different. Now, I want to talk a lot about the combat. I want to discuss the really interesting gameplay of this because obviously, for 95% of this game, it's all about that hack and slash, baby, right? Well, I think the fighting in this is brilliant. This is done by the guy, the director of fighting in this is the person that designed the combat in Devil May Cry, and you feel that DNA. This is about some incredibly quick dodging. There's a thing called perfect evasion, which gives you extra bonus hits and stuff. There's interesting combos, so you're trying to chain together a fire uppercut, or times where you're firing bullets or armor out of your hands because you're channeling the icon of Titan. It is just so cool. And to me, it didn't really take any practice. I have played a lot of Devil May Cry, so maybe I'm just more prepared for what we're getting into here, but I like the fact that really this does feel like an experience you can just drop into. You can just set it and forget it. As soon as you kind of get the idea, the pacing of hit, dodge, use some cooldowns, unleash a limit break for a big fire attack, I think there is a very natural pacing to this that is so cool. Now, I will say the enemies are a little bit spongy. They require a couple hits extra than you might imagine. Even tinier foes usually take a little bit more of bashing about before you get that XP bonus. But to me, I think that is also done for a point. I think it's because they want to encourage you to practice combos, to figure out cooldowns and stuff, so that you're more prepared for that next major fight. So the boss fights in this game are incredibly epic. Now, summons in this game are called Eikons. The major crux of the story and the whole point of this game is to try and destroy the dominants. Certain people are able to take on these elemental aspects called Eikons. They're basically big, huge summons from classic Final Fantasy. Garuda, Shiva, Titan, these huge, impossibly big creatures. Well, these people, the dominants, are who are steering them around like a giant ship. We're trying to destroy the dominants. And each time you do, you unlock extra skill trees. You get a chance to get their elemental powers and add them to your own. And then later on, as you level up, you can actually spend talent points, essentially. You can spend XP to further customize not just your magic, but your specialities, leveling up your icon skills to make it so that your combos are really tailored to your tastes. But the boss fights themselves, thus far, have been insane. Holy heck. I mean, they're practically interactive movies, just bashing people through boulders and explosions going all over the place. I mean, oh my God. I don't want to show them too much because they're kind of spoilery, but man, the icon fights are epic. I hope the last boss fight is an icon because I hope it's like a 45-minute drag-out bash 'em up. That sounds like it's going to be incredibly freaking epic. Final Fantasy XVI is a big departure from classic games, but it has elements that I think people are going to recognize and enjoy. Something like, obviously, the stagger system. When you're fighting people, there's this interesting idea where hitting people, they have a will to fight, but if you manage to keep hitting, combos, breakers, chain together your icon skills and their cooldowns, you can make it so people fall over and take additional damage for a short amount of time. That sounds minor, but really to me it's so cool because I actually think it shows the fact that there is a tactic to this game. There is a real actual impetus to get good, not to just scrape by. There is a real core concept that you need to practice Final Fantasy XVI. They even have a training room that you can go to in your hub to just practice combos and stuff, and that's neat. Final Fantasy XVI is very different. I'm going to do another video when I'm done platinuming it. I want to do a video like with Final Fantasy VII Remake. I ended up doing a video called FF7 Remake after 100 hours. I think I'm going to probably do that with this one again. But these have just been some off-the-cuff impressions on the game thus far. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. And I got to go jump on a plane and go to Too Many Games in Philadelphia. I love you guys very much. Please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And please keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.